for joining this session, that too on a Saturday evening. I really appreciate your cooperation to hear us, to bear with us for next 2 hours. Risk analytics, wow, I think this has been my favorite word since I think couple of years now. And people have their own definition of risk analytics. So today, there could be the risk analytics differs from industry to industry, process to process, and people to people. The definition could be very varied. Today, I'm here to present my perspective of risk analytics and how the same can be integrated with audit to kind of give a better perspective. So before I set the context of becoming risk intelligent, I just wanted to go back 2 steps, um, touching upon the understanding of analytics. Again, analytics, right? Amazing word. Whenever I say this word analytics, everyone says that, wow, that's in booming area. Of course, it's in booming area. If you'll actually see some years back, I think we started our journey. In fact, I started our journey with doing some kind of MIS reporting, which are based out of Excel, to introduction of some statistical model using key statistical function, to again introduction of some business intelligence tool like your ClickView, Tableau, Power BI, and now we are in an era of data science, wherein we use words like machine learning, deep learning technique, right? Sometimes we feel these are all jargons, but Mitesh, who is also there on the call, he will throw some light on that particular thing, maybe after me. But when you actually think, just see your day-to-day life. I think we are using analytics on a day-to-day basis. While my first slide says analytics is everywhere. How? Consider an example: you are going for a grocery shopping, right? If you want to buy a particular product and it's a MBR store, multi-branded store. So before buying any product, you can see same different version of the same product from multiple brands, right? When you buy that particular product, what are the key things you normally try to analyze? If it's an eatable, then you will say, okay, how's the quality, how taste, and last but not the least, because we are human beings, we are also trying to be pocket friendly, maybe I'll see some price, right? So before making a small decision in our life, I'm actually looking at 3 different patterns, or maybe someone can look at 4 5, to kind of get into a conclusion and to get the right product at the right rate, right? Of course, the concept of analytics is much more larger than this. But if someone wants my definition of analytics, I'll say that analytics is nothing but a computational analysis of certain data points, which provides a direction to do the effective decision making. I'll not say that it's going to be the most effective one, but at least it will guide me towards, kind of make a better decision, right? Uh, this is what I think about analytics. Now coming to the risk analytics piece, let me give one more example which maybe everyone can relate to. Consider I have a meeting on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? I am a very late person. And what are the things I'll do to be on time for the meeting? Maybe in the morning, I'll set my alarm at 7 o'clock. Then maybe after waking up, I have to book an Uber or Ola to go wherever I want to go, right? The third thing could be, of course, traffic, which I don't think I can control though. But yeah, these are certain things I'll plan before I go for the meeting. Now just take 2 steps back and look at the scenarios. What can go wrong in this entire process? Consider that, okay, my mobile didn't work and my mobile was switched off and my alarm didn't work in the 7 in the morning. I'm looking for a Ola or Uber. At the same time, maybe due to unavailability of the cabs, I'm not able to book one, right? As I said, traffic is not controllable, so maybe I'll try to skip that part apart. Again, if I have to mitigate this risk, maybe I as a person will do 2 or 3 extra steps so that I can mitigate the risk in an efficient way. Maybe I'll rather than putting alarm in one mobile, I'll put 2 or 3 mobiles. Maybe I'll call up one of my family members. Hey, I have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and maybe you wake me up at 7, right? Maybe I'll book a Ola or Uber one day in advance so that I can be on time, or maybe I can plan my traveling in a better way. Rather than taking Ola or Uber, I'll go by my own car, right? So if you see this entire example, I simply tried to identify what can go wrong, and I made provisions for the risk scenarios which can occur, which will try to mitigate this entire risk. As I said, this is again a real life example, but of course, when I say about risk analytics, it's nothing all about this. So in simple words, if someone asks me what is the definition of risk analytics, I'd say risk analytics is nothing but delivering risk and performance management through the power of data, right? It actually helps, it actually helps to manage the risk related issues by using a range of techniques, technologies, and which actually extrapolate the insights, calculate the likely scenarios, and maybe predict the future events. Right? So now, as I said, my agenda of this particular session is basically not only risk analytics. I'm trying to correlate two data points, audit and risk analytics, right? So see, if you see the content, I'm planning to cover the changing audit landscape, why and where we feel that this RA can be a part of audit for doing a better deliverable. What is the enhanced audit methodology? Where companies are, we are doing to kind of mitigate or to evaluate the risk. Solving risk problems through analytics. Then the risk analytic, I'll try to kind of touch upon a very generic process, saying that where and how in each and every step of a process, as the industry process, risk analytics can be applied. And the later part, how risk is evolving, the decoding the common jargons around data science, what are the risk problems to solve through ML, machine learning life cycle, what is AI, and all that will be again covered by Mitesh in the post me completing my part. Can we move ahead? So why risk analytics, right? If you see nowadays, global expansion is one of the key things for every company, right? The risk management has actually become even more daunting due to the sheer number of tasks, the resources, the deliverables, and the kind of considerably high number of stakeholders. Most of the risk actually does not exist. Consequently, that's the reason companies are being asked to back up their intuition with hard data to better understanding the key risk factors and identify the future risk even if before they occur. So for identify risk, and I think the most common thing when I'm saying about analytics, I cannot just miss the digital change part. So if again you consider 20 years back, I think everyone used to have maybe a landline phone, or maybe every family used to have a single desktop, and internet was a big thing. I'm considering, I'm just saying about me, maybe for you guys, it could have been possible that you had exposed to this technology much more before than me, but I'm just saying 20 years back, right? Actually, now if you'll see, each family member who is in an age group of 15 to 18 years have a smartphone. Most of the people I have seen, they use their own laptops, they have their own smartwatches which are actually connected to the internet, which is actually generating huge data point. I was reading through an article, and it says there are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data which is getting generated every day. There are around 6 billion plus devices. Here it's mentioned about 2.6 billion smartphones, but if you see the electronic devices, including your laptops, your iPads or smartphones, the number is around 6 billion plus. Consider this 6 billion of my digital thing producing around 2.5 quintillions of data every day. The kind of data we are dealing is with huge, right? With the technology and the data, I think automation has become a key thing. No one wants to do anything manually nowadays. So according to this research, that's the reason the jobs are vulnerable to automation now. So recently there was an article which says 35% of the jobs are vulnerable in UK, 47% in US, and 77% in China. Maybe after 10 years, we can see going it up to like 90%, 95%. Maybe no one will be doing any kind of jobs. See, we have introduced robots which kind of taking care of our daily activity, right? With this kind of huge automation, There's a change in the nature of career also. When I started my journey, I was handling Excel or Access, I'm saying about 15 years back, wherein I was doing some kind of MIS reporting and all using MS Excel or MS Access, right? Later on, this visualization tool came into picture, the statistics came into picture. Now we are kind of dealing with a team of data science. So every job is changing, considering the technology is evolving each and every day. And accordingly, that's the reason I think if you see today and after like almost maybe 20 years or 30 years down the line, the job profiles which will come into picture which we have never heard of at this point in time. So that's what I was trying to say. Why audit? Why audit should be lagging behind? If you're living in the world of digital change, I think audit methodology has to be enhanced to kind of give a better result, right? So these are basically some of the key statistics just to kind of make you understand how the digital life is evolving. Can we go to the next slide, Mitesh? Yeah. See, I think I have covered most of the part here. Why changing audit landscape? The technology evolving, the substitutes, because of course the automation is taking into place. Is a primary phase now, and that's the reason we have to change our audit methodology. There is a regulatory. The regulatory market is also kind of needing continuous improvements. The stakeholders are also getting very much demanded nowadays. Gone are those days when audit committees are looking at some simple word report to kind of end to a conclusion. They also need some high technology tool to say that okay, everything is in my company is going well, right? And last but not the least, the talent. We as a people are the continuous changing animals, right? We can't stick to the same thing for a long time. And because we don't want to do the manual jobs, we also wanted to shift our approach from that getting done with the manual job to the automation side. And that's the reason there's a lot of talent pool which are coming into the marketplace, which are actually changing the mirror of the audit. Can you move next? Yeah. So this is basically, if you see my audit as a chapter, if you see the key components to the audit are basically my risk assessment, test of controls, and the substantive testing, right? Again, taking you back to 5 years back when I think we are using the old methodology for doing certain audit procedures, most of the people were trying to focus on risk, substantive testing. So as per audit methodology, based on the risk of material misstatement, we have to take some samples, right? Maybe the range differs from 75 to 300 based on the kind of risk area they are into. And then after, the companies used to give an assurance saying that everything is looking fine or everything is not looking fine. Consider a scenario wherein you are doing a million and trillion of data transaction on a particular company, and you are picking up only 300 samples to give a provide an assurance, right? So initially, our main focus, the audit used to work in terms of most of the time they're focused on doing substantive testing. There was less of test controls, and there was, I think, hardly used to do any kind of risk assessment. Now with this incorporating this risk analytics, the new audit methodology says that we should do a proper risk assessment before actually we pitch into the audit. What do you mean by risk assessment again? So if I have 10 processes to look at, right? Where is the potential, which is the particular area where my maximum risk is sitting? And that can be done using some of the audit risk analytics methodology. Can we move to the next slide, Mitesh? Yeah. See, if you'll again see this traditional audit methodology and what is the need. So basically, if some audit firm is hired for doing the audit, maybe there are 5 areas they are assigned, right? These are the 5 areas, maybe your revenue, maybe your procurement, logistics, anything, right? And the typical audit methodology says, uh, before even knowing the risk, we are putting just equal number of resources and in each and every area. right? And now with the kind of risk assessment tool or the kind of risk analytics piece, what you're trying to say is try to identify the more risk prone area and accordingly align your audit resources. What kind of output it will give? First of all, it will be like, it will not be like the sample method. Like for example, I am a FMCG company, right? I'm operating in 10 different locations. I have recently opened a new branch in maybe Odisha, right? So, and I have all my transactions happening in other metros. So if I, as a person doing a random sampling, there's a high probability that I will do the risk. I'll pick that sample uh, from anywhere, right? Maybe from Odisha, where there is no transaction is happening, and that's the reason the fraud is not there, right? So basically, to see what kind of distribution is there in the business or in the risk, we kind of do a risk assessment procedure wherein you find that, okay, after within this 5 areas, this is where the most of the risk lies. So maybe we'll do a kind of sampling from that area rather than other areas. In fact, companies, I think again the mindset is changing now. So when we are any kind of seller, the first focus is on revenue, right? We try to maximize the revenue instead of seeing the leakages. Instead of seeing the leakages because of non-adherence to some process, or maybe for some existing process gaps. So if someone, maybe we are human beings, if you see someone to, okay, I wanted to increase the sale, maybe everyone will look at the angle that how I'm going to optimize the sale, rather than someone will look at it, how I can decrease the procurement cost, how I can decrease the manufacturing cost, how I can build some additional control set test wherein it will help me decreasing these things, so that ultimately it's gonna impact my revenue, right? The audit mindset is changing, and that's what I'm trying to say here. So basically, rather than putting equal focus on each and every area, we should be looking at the right area where there is a maximum risk setting, and maybe we should put more focus on the same. While your audit procedures remains the same, we are targeting the right audience. Correct? Uh, can we move next, Mitesh? When I'm saying this again, implementation of risk analytics and audit, where should I start from? Okay, after all my transactions are getting processed, should I start at the year end? No, that's not the right idea. I should actually start this risk analytics and audit should go hand in hand to kind of create a second or third line of defense, right? So basically, in whenever you kind of agree upon an audit, basically what you do is basically confirm the audit objective, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, when you are kind of confirming the audit objective, you should parallelly understand what are the potential analytics can be done on that particular area. Simultaneously, you should see the data points that is to be required for extracting, transforming the data to kind of get some meaningful insights of the data. When you are developing the enhanced audit scope, you should actually brainstorm with the key stakeholders how you can make this process so robust, right? When you are kind of testing key hypothesis through random sampling, I'm saying that okay, there will be a focused sampling based on the kind of risk scenarios, and then maybe rather than communicating a result in a kind of Word or PPT, we should give some kind of interactive dashboards, which will not only give the focus around the audit, also it will give you a lot of business insights, a lot of process improvement area, and a lot of things that can improve the current process, right? If you see, there is one more step which is there in the wherein I'm saying about the advanced analytics technology integration in the audit, which again will be taken care by Mitesh in the later half of this session. So this is basically, I think you must be, I think more or less you must be aware of this fact, how normally we solve a risk problem through analytics, right? From insight to my action. The first step is basically to understand what is my business doing, right? If I'm a company who doesn't have a kind of maybe manufacturing process, right? And if I'm saying about, okay, you can do bomb analytics, am I sounding relevant? No, right? So initially, when we actually try for implementing risk analytics, you should first know the business, what kind of business they are into, what is the kind of process control, everything, from what is the kind of controls they have implemented, what is the kind of business processes, what is the approval metrics, everything. You should first have the business understanding. Once I have this business understanding, because I'm talking about risk analytics, wherein the base is only data, without data I cannot function. So the second level of thing we normally do is basically to understand the data. The third leg is, of course, my blending leg, wherein I have to do a lot of data preparation using some of the key tools available, like your SQL, your Alteryx, your NIMES. I think we are surrounded by all this kind of applications and technology. We can use any of them and kind of do the data preparation. Then we create a model, right, to test those hypotheses that we have built. Of course, when you do a data-driven analytics and the normal scenario, there are certain things which actually goes through mail approval, right? So maybe the data-driven analytics cannot get hold of those instances. So maybe we have to do a lot of evaluation in terms of whatever is coming as a kind of output of your risk analytics. Is it valid or not? Then you evaluate. And the last step is nothing but your evolvement and your deployment, right? So this is basically a typical process flow where, wherever a risk analytics has to be implemented, these are the steps that we do, right? Can we move next? So this is what I have done here is, I have done a base level mapping of where risk analytics is applicable across various processes. Of course, I'll not be able to get into details of this, but at a broader level, starting from your procurement, from your book closing process, for your vendor management, your payments, your sales and marketing, your revenue, right? Your payroll processes. I think nowadays when you actually search this in Google, if you type risk analytics, the next thing is like risk analytics for banking, risk analytics for FMCG, risk analytics for payroll, right? So basically these are the key terms. So basically what I'm trying to say here is risk analytics is not a concept. It is a concept. It can be applicable for any industry, any process, just that you have to have the right understanding of the process and the business. So these are basically some of the key analytics we do whenever a risk analytics implementation comes into picture, and the end output is in the form of visual dashboards. I'll maybe to yeah. So this is what I have prepared for you. Maybe kind of getting into a details of a particular process so that you can get a flavor of how risk analytics works. Everybody must be aware of the procurement cycle, right? I think 80 to 90% of the company who I think 100% of the company who are into any kind of manufacturing or retail, they have a procurement process. Right? When they do procurement, there's a cycle to it. What I've done here is I have tried to uh, create the entire procurement process cycle. And of course, whenever a cycle is getting created, to give an assurance from an IT angle or a process angle, there are some system controls, there are some manual controls that is already being built. Consider an example, like large FMCG companies, like maybe for example HUL or Godrej, anything, right? I think SAP is the most used ERP as of now when it comes to large companies. So when they design this SAP, or maybe they can be in Ariba, they can be in SAP HANA, they can be in Navision. Whenever you're kind of designing an ERP, there are a lot of controls that has been built, right? Some of them could be your based on the risk control matrix. Some of them will be your system controls. Some of them will be your manual controls. And now we are kind of adding a third layer of it, which we are saying is a transaction monitoring control. You must have heard about the word called CCM, right? CCM is nothing but a very famous risk analytics tool, uh, uh, that risk analytics solution that are implemented widely by organization nowadays. What is CCM? CCM is nothing but continuously monitoring your controls to see where things can go wrong so that they can correct it. See, if you see the transition of risk analytics here, earlier it was what can go wrong, and now it's how things can get right. Correct? And this detective and transaction monitoring system allows you to build those additional functionality to your solution or to your ERP to kind of monitor this risk, or maybe identify ideas to mitigate this risk. So let me take you through the example what I have created for you. So if you see any procurement cycle, the first thing we do is a vendor onboarding, right? uh, Again, going back, whenever you want to buy something, you talk to multiple vendors, right? You might have to do a price comparison, everything you do, right? Similar case, when a company wants to onboard the vendor, they will be doing there are certain SLAs which has to be followed. Correct? The evaluation of the particular vendor based on the SLA, that's a kind of manual control 90% of the company has. You know, when you actually onboard a vendor, you normally try to take their physical copy of all the like your PAN card, your TAN number, your whatever details are been required for onboarding a vendor. The companies does all the due diligence. But where you can see that, okay, where is the scope of risk analytics here? As I told you, now if you'll see, every information is available in internet. There are some 5 vendors, and you as a company might not be able to onboard all the 5 vendors, because you also have a constraint that for a particular material procurement you can only have 5 or 10 or 15 registered vendors. How you actually evaluate these vendors? So that's where the risk analytics comes into picture. So there is a lot of tools and technology which is basically a web scraping technology, wherein Google wherein all the vendor information based on the kind of sentiment analysis. People do a lot of posts in social medias, according to that web scraping. If I'm writing my name, maybe there will be 10 feedbacks which will be coming from 10 different people from some social media. So maybe for this vendor onboarding also, to manage the risk, or maybe to not get fraudulent in the after I onboard that vendor, I might do a kind of web scraping, right, which will give me additional comfort that I'm kind of empaled with the right vendor. Correct? This is something about vendor onboarding. Similarly, after vendor onboarding, what is the next step we do? If you have anything, again, SAP, Navision, wherever, right, we typically maintain a vendor master. When you create a vendor master, 90% of the companies are actually you have seen those VBA forms, right? Unless and otherwise you don't fill certain mandatory field, you'll not be able to create that vendor, which is a system control which is available in most of the ERP, most of the mature ERPs, if I have to correct myself. But what if my PAN card is like a 10-digit card, right? First 5 digit are my maybe text, and the next 5 digit are my numbers. What if I'm just putting a random number? I'm putting just a random number. I don't know. There are certain rules, wherein a PAN number is formed. So that control is not there in the system. Correct? So maybe there you have the system control for creation, not creating the vendor without the mandatory field, or maybe flagging of the case wherein there is a duplicate details is being entered into the system. But at the same time, someone can put something like a NA or maybe some other thing which where there is no validation, and your vendor master can get created. And when the payment cycle will come, you might face a challenge in terms of making the right payment. Correct? So to prohibit this risk, what can be built from a risk analytics platform? Maybe, but again, it's not going to be a kind of detective, it's not going to be a kind of preventive control. But what we can do is, maybe after my vendor master is getting created, I can do a risk analytics solution on that entire master data management piece, wherein I can do certain tests around, if my PAN number is not 10 digit, if my fourth character of my PAN number is like not my initial name, there are certain tests and rules that can be defined to ensure my first assurance, which is my vendor master, is that is correct. In fact, I have seen a lot of companies doing some control analytics around some 30 to 40 risk analytics test, considering their GST, their PAN, and there are so many their payments, only on the vendor master piece. Right? Now, once you create the vendor, what is the next step? Basically, sometimes it's required that okay, Sapna ka, I just changed my mobile number, right? I have to change that. So when you update vendor details, there also you need some control. What if I'm a blacklisted vendor, and considering the companies have a limited idea on what I'm doing, I'm just unchecking that blacklisting. I'm kind of unblocking that. I'm putting an order and I'm coming back. I don't think so. Where the companies deal with multiple transactions per day, they'll be able to see what are the kind of change and change backs has been done, in that particular day. And there again comes into my risk analytics comes to picture, wherein you can analyze the change log to see if there is any unusual pattern on the kind of change of the critical, or maybe critical fields, or maybe something like blacklisting to making it active or something like that. And you can run those tests and kind of get a assurance, right? This is on the entire vendor management master data management cycle. And after my vendor is getting created, what is the next step I do? I do a PR creation, my purchase requisition, right? Again, when most of the companies, when they create a PR, there's a standard SOP in place, wherein there has to be certain norms that has to be followed for creating a PR, but it's again a manual control. But again, if you wanted to see the risk angle, as I told you, I can update the vendor details, then I can still do a unblock a blacklisted vendor, and I can raise a PR, and then I can block them, right? If something like that has happened, how you're going to identify it? It could be a post facto analysis, right? You can design and develop tests to see that okay, this is the case, and maybe there could have happened that this unblocking and blocking is with a proper mail approval, but I'll not be able to see that unless and otherwise I see there's an exception sitting here. Great. Then after my PO creation, PR creation, I move to the PO creation. Again, when I create a purchase order, there are a lot of things like I have to follow that delegation of authority that I have to follow. That's a kind of again manual control. But most of the companies have controls like I cannot create a PO without a proper PR. So which is more of a system control. I think that should not be an area. But consider an example, if I have a limitations that I should be only raising a PO of 10K with Sapna, but what if maybe at one go, what if someone has done 9K in one transaction, 9K in other transaction, because that person has some personal, maybe relationship with me. And that's the reason, he the person who is sitting at the client and he wants to give me some kind of benefit, right? So make sure that the PO creation process is also in line with the business. We have certain analytics. We can design certain analytics like your maybe spec PO analysis, right? If my same kind of material at same plant is getting procured, why there are two POs getting raised on the same day, right? Maybe something like the most of the companies, they follow a PO route, they follow a non-PO route also, right? If my PO route for certain procurements, if the non-PO route is followed, right? So basically, if you see this entire piece, so each and every stage of my process, there are certain analytics that has been defined, and this gives you a additional level of assurance, or maybe a kind of assurance to kind of manage this entire risk process and kind of give a effective decision making system. maybe I think all of them will be repetition, because there will be some of the other overlap. You can go through it. I'll not spend more going to each and every cycle. Yeah. Can we move next? So basically, okay, this is what actually I thought from a risk analytics perspective I would want to cover at a processes mapping. As I said, the similar kind of analytics can be designed at different processes like my book closing, my revenue cycle and everything, which is really more or less similar. The test and the risk scenarios may differ from company to company. But yeah, this is what a risk analytics platform or become have actually become more important now. Yeah, I think now we are moving towards how this risk analytics is evolving, and I'd like to hand it over to Mitesh to take it further.
Thank you, Sapna. Sapna, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mitesh.
Okay. So, so Swapna took us through, introducing risk analytics, and also took us through some of the processes that can be that can be touched through risk analytics. What I am here to speak about is the modern approach to risk analytics, and the futuristic approach to risk analytics. Uh, I mean, everybody knows what is insights, what is analytics. I mean, it's not new, but what we need to understand is that it's evolving, and and this evolution has just taken a renewed importance, especially data science. And as a result of the explosion in data, uh, I mean, we all know know about the quantified impact of the explosion in data, but we also need to know the tools and the capabilities that are available to us, and especially the exponentials. And we can see here in the evolution of analytics table that we can see the chart, there are table stakes capabilities. Now these table stakes capabilities are something that the leaders are the risk leaders, I would say, are already uh, using it, or they are at some level of maturity of using that. But they have started into that area. Business intelligence visualization is something, is the bread and butter for risk analytics. But we can see data lakes are coming, we can see predictive analytics coming, we can see a lot of data modeling coming. But the outer edge of analytics developments, which are the exponentials that you can see, all are in the quest of this, using this AI, cognitive, machine learning. Machine learning is the word which has been used like everywhere. And um, uh, and and yes, that's what I'm here to talk about. And you can gain a significant competitive advantage by using some of the table stakes as a bread and butter, and exponentials as something that you need to start using, and you can see powerful outcomes coming because of that. All the disruptors that we talk about, data, that's the major disruptor. Technology, again, is another disruptor. It's evolving like really really fast. uh, and innovative science, statistics has come. I mean, it's the breathe of air which you can new fresh of air which you can breathe, because statistics, which is such an old subject, is now put into decision science. And that's where risk analytics is evolving by using these techniques, uh, and uh, and they are achieving great results because of that, and there is a lot of potential. So just to talk about the maturity stages of which the risk analytics can be. So different organizations have different stages that they are in. uh, and what we see as consultants when we speak with different companies, we see that a lot of risk analytics processes are right now at rule based systems, the developing stage, which you see as stage 2. And these rule based systems are something which are which are good, but which only gives us known abnormality or known anomalies discovery, right? Now there is advanced stage where the anomalies which are complex but which are still known anomalies. So they integrate these rules with some kind of supervised learning or some kind of machine learning. Now these are the jargons which I am throwing at you right now. So I will decode these jargons in the next slide for you to understand. But from this slide, what I want you to understand is that different stages at which the organizations are from a risk analytics point of view, and you can see the tools and the skill sets which each of the stages demand. Now you can see that a visualization consultant or an audit expert is enough for a rule based system. But if you want to um, develop into advanced and leading stages, you need different kind of skill sets and tools. You can see some of the tools which are written here, which is Python, R, and we are using a lot of skill sets of data science skill sets or big data engineering skill sets, and there is a machine learning engineer which people talk about. So then you need a cloud architect. But but really the leading stage is where the risk analytics domain will has to reach as fast as possible, and this leading stage should be able to uh, discover unknown abnormalities over and above the known abnormalities or anomalies, right? And that's where the organization's risk control maturity should be. So let me, before we get into this topic, let me just decode some jargons for you. I'm sure a lot of our audience must be aware about this, and but just for the larger interest of, I thought there is a need to decode this. So let's do that. So you must be hearing AI, you must be hearing ML, you must be hearing deep learning, data science, and EDA, and all this stuff. So how they relate to each other, and what are they actually? So let me just articulate it. So AI basically describes machines that can perform tasks which resemble those of humans. So basically, it implies machines that artificially model human intelligence. Now, now this is again, I don't know if I simplified it. What I'm trying to say is that AI systems help us manage, model, and analyze complex systems, and they mimic humans, and they mimic human intelligence, and that's what AI systems are, right? Now, what is machine learning? Now, machine learning essentially is a building block for AI. It is not very different from AI, but it is a building block within AI. But by doing machine learning, you are teaching a machine to learn how to perform a particular task, like image recognition or fraud detection. Yeah, in the risk analytics context. Now, algorithms that I mean, there is a general definition of machine learning. Let me just say it loud. So algorithms that pass data, learn from that data, and then apply what they have learned from the data to make informed decisions. This is machine learning. It's a building block of AI. Now, deep learning. Deep learning is a new and an evolving approach which is now coming into machine learning. It is one of the many approaches which machine learning has, and it implements artificial neural network. Maybe some of you have heard about it, but it is basically has a deep layers within the algorithms that allows for more complex processing. So it is one of the many approaches to machine learning which allows more complex processing as compared to other approaches of machine learning which are more simpler. So that's deep learning. uh, uh, Data science. Now, data science is actually a broad field that spans across all the stages of analytics: data collection, data management, data analysis, data interpretation, especially leading to large amounts of data, right? And it integrates all the terms that I spoke about above, AI, ML, and DL, with helping these techniques to achieve the goal of extracting insights from the data. And so EDA, what is EDA? EDA is exploratory data analysis. So it basically extracts insights out of the data. What does data science encompasses? Data science encompasses predictive analytics using maths and statistics. Even the basic visualization or a basic trend chart that you are building in your PPT, as basic as that, that's data science, right? Because what you are trying to do is you're trying to interpret information from the data. Now, the field involves a lot of many different disciplines like statistical inference. Even a domain expert is very much required to the data science field. And so data science helps us answer the question, what if? And it plays a crucial role in building machine learning and AI systems. That's what it's a broad field. It's so that this visualization kind of depict where they are related to each other. Okay. Uh, okay. So let me go to the next slide. Now here, I want to simplify for you what is machine learning. Now, why I'm doing this? Because we can see that a lot of people, a lot of risk analytics problems are solved in today's current situation in in today's area of risk analytics. Machine learning has been applied very frequently, and a lot of machine learning approaches are available to solve some of the risk analytics problems. So let's get deeper into this. I've just simplified it. You can so the you can compare it with the traditional rule based approach. Now, what is rule based? Basically, from data you create rules and logics, and you feed it to the computer, and the computer runs it, and just like an Excel, right? But machine learning, what it does is when you feed the data to the computer and or the system, the machine learning algorithm develops the rules by itself by identifying the patterns in the data. This algorithm helps them develop the rules. So we get a predictive output out of that. So that's what we need to know from a mathematical and a statistical algorithm point of view. What machine learning does, it automatically learns from the data. So you don't need to program it or rule it. So there are approaches available to do that. I want to briefly touch upon the types of machine learning. I'm sure you must have heard about supervised learning, unsupervised learning a lot. Now, just to get, I don't want to, go more technical about it, but I will try to simplify it as much as possible what they mean. So we can see supervised learning. You can see supervised learning builds on a labeled data set. Now, what is a labeled data set? It means that there is a historical pattern which is there, which gives we know a historical fraud, which is fraud or an anomaly which has happened. Now that label helps us identify the pattern and attach it to that label, and that's supervised learning. Now I'll try to simplify this in the basis of example. We can see that loan default, it's the most basic example. Like, so credit defaults. So you know from history what kind of people or what kind of characteristics of people, they default. And from that you can learn. And that's supervised learning. Again, customer churn, which customer left us, or what kind of customer leave us, or, employee churn, or you can say, now sales forecasting. Again, sales forecasting is a regression problem. Not to get into classification and regression, what I'm trying to say is, the seasonality patterns, the historical sales patterns. On the basis of that, you can forecast on a supervised way. Of course, unknown patterns cannot be discovered. For example, a pandemic like COVID, it's a black swan event. It has it has thrown away all the forecasts which the modelers have created, right? So that does not apply here. But what I'm trying to say is, in a supervised manner, the history can help us build this model. Now let's talk about unsupervised. Now it's unlabeled data set. Now unsupervised is basically used to group the data points. For example, clustering, customer segmentation is a very basic example. Now Risk categorization. I will take you through one of the use case where we have actually done this risk categorization. Anomaly detection. Now, how can you detect anomalies? Now, anomalies can be only be detected with not normal behavior. If you want to identify not normal behavior, you have to identify the normal behavior. Now, this normal behavior identification has to be done through grouping and clustering. So, these are some of the examples which fall into the approach of unsupervised learning. So reinforcement learning is, I mean, it's slightly very complex. You know, driverless cars, which learns from the mistakes, and you know, it's self-learning approach. That's where robots or you know Google Go, the game chess, all those things are reinforcement learning. Just to for your knowledge. Okay. Um, I'm just getting into this. I was more getting into machine learning and data science. Let me slowly move towards risk now. Now, how could we relate machine learning to risk and problem? So, which risk problem to take on? I mean, not all problems require machine learning to be applied to solve them, right? A supporting framework like this can help you to decide which risk problem to take on. Okay, so if you see on the top, do you need automation? Do you need? Can you write the rules yourself? Then you definitely don't need an algorithm or a system to create the rule, right? So then the major roadblock with all the risk analytics teams are or the risk officers are facing is the data. On the bottom left, you can see, do you have data? If you don't have enough data, you basically cannot build machine learning. So go collect data, create an environment of collecting data, create the data lakes, create the systems that helps us capture data, and it's the key to any analytics that you want to do, right? So it's just not about machine learning, it's about any analytics. So that's the key. Now collection, there is a lot of data which is available, but the collection of data, putting it in the right uh, uh, baskets for consumption, for analytics consumption, is another major challenge. That's where solution architects come into picture, right? So so yeah, this is the kind of framework which can help you. You can also look at, do you have a regular pattern? Do you have can you measure the success? If you cannot measure the success of the risk problem, then you have to refine your problem again, right? What do I mean by risk problem? I will basically a problem like an automated control failure or some a recurring problem which is happening, or product expiry or something. I will take you through one of the use case of product expiry or frauds. I mean, is the most obvious risk example, which is fraud detection, right? Uh, okay. Now,
So Bitesh, sorry, not to break your rhythm, but so I'm just looking at some of the chat messages which coming to, while you're covering it very detailed, I really appreciate. But so any examples on this, like where machine learning, how it's used in cyber security, GRC domain? That's where the audience are a little curious. If at all you have any use cases or examples, maybe, because so that will help. Again, I'm not stopping your rhythm, but maybe you can cover it at the end also, like because yeah. Sorry to stop you.
no, that's okay. Uh, Sorry, I'm in the flow of the slides. I did
No,
not see.
absolutely. Please continue. But just keep in, because there's some questions like how this machine learning are nowadays used in the uh, in the in this domain, right? Predominantly, audience are more from the information systems domain. So yeah, if you
Yeah, so probably information systems domain is something which you may not get here from an example point of view, but from a use case point of view, what we have covered, or some of the solutions point of view, what we have covered is from a
no, no.
and
Okay, you please carry on. Maybe at the end we can discuss few of the. There's a lot of questions, but I thought I'll just so you can just tune your that towards this GRC domain or this domain. Yeah, if at all you have any examples. Yeah, please continue, Moshe.
Sure. Sure. This is so. Let me take you through some of the use cases that I wish to show here, or some of the use cases which I have experienced personally, and these are basically anticipating risk kind of a solution which is there. Now, this solution is for audit planning. Now, again, this is from an audit perspective uh, uh, where a risk prioritization, or before even you start your audits, what are the risk categorizations that can be done for the audit, and this is one of the major approach where we can we can apply to get the audit prioritization. um, so these are typical steps: data inputs, model development, model interpretation, and finally the audit prioritize scope. Now, from a data input point of view, there are the data input which this approach can take into consideration are qualitative and quantitative data. Now, quantitative data which they can take from ERP systems, uh, now from different web portals, separate web portals which are available which within the organization, prior audit observations, again history, uh, and from a qualitative point of view, we can see a lot of entity specific risks, some surveys we do around with the audit areas to get some of the indicators, some risk indicators, some their governance framework, external regulatory guidelines which concern them, a lot of fraud indicators. So these are some of the data inputs which go into which can take this model, and of course this qualitative data can be converted into the quantitative data for model consumption. Um Model development and uh, model interpretation is a key part of model interpretation is a key part post model development. Not to get too technical into model development, but from a model interpretation point of view, when you get groups of clusters, you sit with the SME, you sit with the risk officer, you sit with the domain expert, and you understand that the risk which can be assigned to the group. So let me take you so this is the approach. Let me take you through the use case. Now this is the actual data that went into the actual data inputs that went into the model for audit prioritization, and you can see the final output that came out are the this was for plants. We did it for one of our client, and there's a high risk plant or very high risk, or some specific partial audit recommended for specific risk. So this unsupervised approach helped us identify that. Um, a lot of a lot of quantitative and qualitative. You can see a lot location statistics, previous compliance history. You can see a lot of variables, which example variables which were taken into consideration. Now, actually, this model, the unsupervised model that was applied, and not to get into, I don't want to get into the specifics of the model application, just but I wanted to discuss more on the value which this model created for the organization. So, what? So, if you can see, there was an existing rule-based model which they used for their audit planning. So there are 250 plants, out of which plants to audit. Now, given in this COVID situation, the audit was much more difficult. So which plant you can audit through desktop audit or specific risk, or all those things were taken into consideration. And you can see there was a major advantage which the model had over the rule base. You can see some categorization of the plants changed, and because of that, so you can see the advantage which it brought is it automatically discovers the data pattern, as I said, and it can blend quantitative and qualitative variables. A lot of time your data talks about something, but the domain expert, he has that gut knowledge and he has this experience on the basis of what, and that experience does not come into the data. And this model, using this model and approach, we can get that data also into consideration. Of course, the value which it brought was a lot of savings. We could cover some of the plants remotely through desktop audits. Uh, there were savings in terms of man days, in terms of uh, 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 scalability. This model is, you can run this model frequently, because this is an automatic model which is once developed. You can just, if you want to speed it again, you can just add some factors and you can just run it very fast. A razor sharp focus, basically a deep dive into the control areas, which it helps overall strengthening of the process. So this is one of the use case which actually is used for audit planning. Now let me take you through another use case. Now this is not from audit perspective. This is more from process control perspective, or I would say process control perspective. Now this is a supply chain problem, which I can say it's from a supply chain domain. Now this problem was basically there was high product expiry happening in a particular storage location. Now this was a recurring problem, and uh, what we helped client, we could create a preventive alert, and here we use the supervised approach, right? And an advanced alert which can be created, which kept in a particular storage location. Now this predictive analytics model uh, could also give us the root causes of what was the root causes of this expiry. So there is a decision tree based approach which can be used, and this can help us do a lot of root causing, and predictive preventive alert can also be created from using this. So there are the two advantages of this kind of a model. Now this model predicted and flagged the expiry instances. This model also improved the process because the transaction level control failure was identified. You can see these are the modeling steps which we took. Uh, uh, from a data collection point of view, systems data was mainly used from SAP, all the supply chain modules and various other various other portals which were there. So we could use systems data from a supervised point of view, and from a history we could understand the root causes uh, of the expiry. So, and in case a model is, a PO is raised for a particular product, and the PO is raised, or even at any stages, the probability of the expiry start getting high, a preventive alert could be generated through this model. Now, of course, this led to a lot of savings, and but this kind of problems can be solved through machine learning, a preventive alert or something like that. So from a process control point of view, and this is done over and above what from the SAP systems data that we could use. Um, Additionally, what this model could help now, you can see there we have talked about continuous control monitoring. Swapna mentioned about that. Now this continuous control monitoring, a lot of processes which on those processes monitoring dashboarding is already there. Now this model was applied in parallel through that, and it could generate the preventive alert for the second line of defense and the third line of defense, in addition to the control monitor. This is the technology deployment kind of a kind of an architecture where you can see how this was this was seamlessly binded together with the continuous control monitoring capabilities which already the organization had, and this empowered the third line of defense with better information for improving the risk control labs. So it's basically a stop before it happened approach, a preventive approach, which was taken. Okay. Satish, I want to take a pause. Are we on the right track or something?
Absolutely going well, and please continue, and definitely there are a lot of active questions also in the Q&A window. Maybe once you finish your we can discuss. Absolutely, it's going well, Mitesh.
Sure. Okay. So we talked about one on the audit prioritization use case, which was applied through unsupervised learning, and we talked about a preventive control, preventive alert kind of a use case for using supervised learning for control labs in supply chain. Now this is the use case which is very unique to project risk. Now this so there are these companies which have large big ticket projects which runs into hundreds of crores, right? And they what the problem with them is, the problem that they face is that they have their project management systems which are different from their finance and cost systems. Now when this two so what the solution that we provided was that there was a lot of so this because of this project tracking was very difficult. That was the first thing. Second, they could not measure the project risk, the risk which the project is happening. So they could, if they could measure the risk at a project management level from an activity point of view, but they could not attach it from uh, to the financial management point of view, or the cost management point of view, or the margin management point of view. And that's where uh, our unique approach, which we applied, I mean, this is a customized approach, a data science based approach, which can help them create this project risk and decision support tool, which can provide foresight into the project to both the CFO teams and the CEO teams, right? Now, so what this you can see from the solution approach, there was this descriptive analytics model. So descriptive analytics is all visualization tool which is there, and there is a predictive modeling or a modeling tool which is there. Both were combined together to get the, so this delay prediction was the major output of the predictive modeling tool. Basically, the forecasting the activity, the project which is currently in progress, we could, the model could predict the delay at an activity level, at a sub activity level, and at a task level, as well as at the site level. So it could aggregate from the lowest to the highest level, and the delay prediction was provided. Secondly, the decision support tool, what it helped us, it provided the root causing of the delay and also the cost impact of the delay. So together you can get a unique view, or a very a very high level of visibility into the project, and a high level of predictability for the project, so that you can make decisions and you can tweak the activity and the project plan, and you can work for saving your cost and improving on margins. Because a lot of these high tech projects, they are on contract basis, where you know, government projects where there is a fixed fee which has been decided at the start of the project, and you have to basically do your cost management throughout the project cycle. And that's where this kind of a solution helped us. The delay prediction technique that we used was Monte Carlo, and there, I mean, it's widely used Monte Carlo technique. There are a lot of publicly available licensed tools which can do this, but this can be, we have done it using a Tableau and a Python. So Python is open source, and Tableau is something which is very cheap. And this solution is right now in place for this kind of a client, and they are managing their project foresight using this, and reducing their project risk using this kind of a project. So this is a very unique risk analytics project which is there, which a lot of general risks do not cover. You have a lot of financial risk. You have we know all the general risks which are there in the model, and this is something unique. I just wanted to take you through the architecture as well, which I talked about. There is a prediction model, there is site benchmarking, and the visualization layer. This is the final output. You can see the root cause, the cost analysis, and the cost impacts. So it's kind of a model architecture which is there. Um, Project risk. So this is basically the use case of a project risk model. Okay, let me go through the next slide. Uh, Fraud analytics. I think this topic needs to be touched upon. I mean, it's very from a risk analytics point of view. This is fraud detection is a very important and a very big area, especially in the FSI domain or banking financial domain. It's broad, and it is now coming into other industries as well. E-commerce, there is digital, and there is payments. So there's all those areas. There's a lot of fraud analytics is required. Now, from a from a machine learning lens, if we see the fraud analytics, the current state is this: generic rules and a supervised machine learning. So basically, this is the current state. These are evolved systems. Definitely, these are evolved systems, especially in the global market, in the global world or the developed world. We have these evolved systems which are there now, advanced states which are there. But in India, when we have interacted with a lot of clients, I think we see a lot of generic rule-based fraud analytics and a supervised learning model, which gives the known frauds. Now, when the unsupervised learning approach is the need of the hour here. Basically, on the top of this, there is a additional layer of unsupervised, which can uh, help us uncover the unknown frauds. I mean, that is the biggest challenge which is happening. So basically, the current state is relying on the known patterns or the fraud patterns, and that's where the challenge is. Frauds typically do not happen, which are having known patterns, and it can raise a flag. It's the unknown nature of the fraud which is very important to crack, and that's where machine learning is the key to fraud analytics approaches, fraud analytics solution. Now, this is kind of a high level technical approach. I do not want to dwell much into the techniques which are there. Is this clustering technique, there is this Markov chain modeling, there is association graph analytics. So what this kind of techniques help us is that association graph analysis, it locates the associations between the users, so suspicious connections, so convolutions between the connections. This is one of the collective anomalies which can be there, or the sequence of events. Basically, if the sequence of events is not proper and there is a digression from the sequence of events, this Markov chain modeling can help. So this is in the form of contextual anomalies, which you can say. And this is point anomalies, which are not normal behavior, which is basically simple anomaly detection. There are much more advanced techniques which are available to from a machine learning point of view, which help us discover the unknown fraudulent patterns. That's where the cracking the unknown patterns is where machine learning will help you. Especially deep learning, where I talked about, it's a very complex application of machine learning. That's where this kind of patterns can be applied. Um, this is a high level technical approach. Of course, domain expert insight, a data science approach or a machine learning is nothing without a domain expert. It will only work when there is a domain expert married with the machine learning approach, or a machine learning architecture or a solution which is there. In case because data scientist, if you currently, the demand of data scientists is very high, the skill set available is very low, and the second problem is they do not come from domain. It's very rare you can get somebody from domain, right? So that's this, right? That's the crux of the machine learning, marrying with the domain expert. Okay, so this is about the fraud analytics. I'm going to take you through some of the high level fraud analytics approach here. Now, of course, data collection is the key to any fraud analytics we are doing. And these days, so this is an example of a payment systems where the stages in fraud analytics are being prescribed over here. But what I want to say is that due to social media and digital explosion, where you can also process social media data in your fraud analytics testing to get associations, and that's where a lot of fraud can be uncovered. Of course, there are a lot of false positive, and false positive is one of the biggest challenge of fraud analytics these days, because it can impact business. And again, a domain expert or a forensic expert help us identify the false positive is the key to fraud analytics here. Now we can see result management here. Of course, once the results are out, uh, you need to map your results in the form of actionables. Now, if the results, for example, if there is a risk score which is high on improper payments, on recovery, then that kind of a result needs to go into uh, that actionable business decision. This is just an example which I am showing over here. But the key here is that as important the machine learning or the advanced analytics, forensic review or fraud analytics is there, information processing and result management is also very key to reach to the final stage of uh, decision making and actionable. That's where the machine learning can add value. It's only as good as the data it has, and it's only as good as the results usage of result it provides. So uh, that is one of the key message here in this slide.
So Mitesh, just because you're talking payments, so if you don't mind, I'll just take 2 minutes. I know maybe if, I'm intervening, but because I work in the payment security domain, so I just want to add how typically this ML AI today so much widely used in this payment security domain, because I work in a payment security company itself, where like typically if you look at most of the transaction processing today, like the way I'm sure most of you, when you use a card transaction, right, when especially card not present transaction, you like where you don't display the card, but imagine all e-commerce transaction, right, typically where there's no card not present. That is where that multiple frauds today, like most of the frauds happens in e-commerce, because like your card is compromised, or so this is where typically the risk engines, especially in most of the banks, we all use this so much, but we don't think in the way, because most of the banks use this risk-based solutions, which are so much tightly integrated into their backend systems. Like you'll be surprised to know, like every transaction which passes through, there's so much of data out there. While RBI, go back to the earlier RBI mandate of multi-factor authentication, where today every transaction you do, you get a OTP. The traditional transaction processing system, right, where you do a e-commerce transaction, there's a OTP which comes as second factor. Now, in fact, there's a EMV direction where so traditionally you are challenged for every transaction with a OTP. Like even if you do a 50 rupees transaction, you get a OTP on a mobile phone. But now that is now being elevated as a risk, like because bank carries a lot of data. Now they know your pattern, the usage. So the point what I'm trying to make is, of course, because this was talking payment, so I thought I could not stop myself, because there's so much of data out there with banks are sitting on. So they are now adopting these solutions where, in fact, most of the banks use this risk analytics and fraud engines, which every transaction passes through that, and every customer has got like every transaction there's a risk score attached to a transaction, and ultimately the risk engine can detect that is this a normal transaction, because it knows a pattern, right? What is the shopping pattern? What is your typical buying pattern? Where do you go? Where do you live? What transaction you do? So suddenly when the system looks, like if you have a transaction which is like, I think what Mitesh was saying, anomaly, right? If it's not a standard transaction, if there's a deviation, the risk engine will really, in fact, alert. And I'm sure most of you get a phone call or a IVR call on mobile phone when this transaction is suspicious, typically. So I thought that's the best example, because in the current context today, e-commerce is so much out there, and so one was RBI mandate on a passive authentication like get OTP, but then today the EMB and EMB Co, right? The next, I'm basically, I don't want to talk too much technical, but it's basically, it's called 3D Secure. It's called 3D Secure, which traditional 3D is 1.0. 3D Secure was more passive. Every transaction OTP has to come to your phone. But today, the 3D is 2.0, what we call risk-based authentication, typically is basically looking at the data science, so much of data out there. So, and especially if you're doing a transaction from mobile phone, because there's so much of more telemetry data can come in, because you're in which place, because mobile phone will throw a lot of data. So all this is data. So much of data is used, and probably going forward, if you do a normal transaction, you may not get OTP. In fact, that's the next version of 3D Secure. And if the transaction is really suspicious, if it's not a standard transaction, then only will be challenged. See, a lot of people ask me, I go to US, I don't get OTP, because typically the US or a lot of countries, they use risk-based authentication. They don't challenge you with OTP for every small transaction. They only it's called step-up authentication. Your authentication gets stepped up the moment the transaction is risky. So that is going to come in the India also, because now slowly banks are looking at, because this data science, risk-based authentication. So today the 3D is 2.0, which is going to be very soon live, is a risk-based, because there's so much of data out there, and today most of transactions come from mobile phone. And so while no doubt this is already used so extensively, a lot of banks for fraud analytics, like of course today so much of fraudulent transactions out there happening, because so these systems, these data science, this AI ML, they're all so much tightly embedded, which we don't see. But yeah, so it is all practically today every bank uses this. In fact, there's a company called FICO, and that they're the leader. Of course, we also have a risk-based solution. We support a lot of large banks. So I thought, so in payment security, especially in the payments domain, AI, ML, data science is extensively used. And also adding to, I think a lot of questions I was looking inside cyber, there was a question like why still there are a lot of breaches. So yes, in fact, today, most of the cyber security companies, if you look at, I think that this is the term next gen, right? A lot of these next gen solutions, whether it's next gen antivirus or next gen EDR or next gen SIM solution. If you look at IBM and all, they're talking more predictive analytics and risk. Of course, no doubt IBM has got their own Watson platform, which is more predictive, like before the fraud happens. Or so today, all these are embedded into most of the SIM solutions. I'm sure most of you, the next gen SOCs, what we call, right? Every SIM solution today uses a lot of this kind of pattern, and of course, so because there's so much of data, what we call intelligence, right? Whether it's a intelligence coming from outside, the threat intelligence, or the intelligence which is internally. So typically cyber attacks are growing, cyber breaches are growing, and all this complexity, definitely AI is helping, no doubt about that, AI, ML. So it may not be visible outside, but most of this, I should say, correlation engines of all SIM solutions use AI so much within. And I'm sure most of you heard of this UBE, right? User Behavior Entity, where of course the system understands what is a traditional standard pattern, what time you come, what time you go, and if there's any deviation. So that's where typically because there's a lot of data out there, and that data can be used. In fact, AI is used extensively. So I just wanted to add that it's not that cybersecurity AI is not used, and absolutely. So anyway, I thought I'll talk about the payment security part, but I'm sorry, Mitesh, you can continue, and maybe we can talk in the end more about how AI is more extensively used in cybersecurity solutions, whether it's Palo Alto or you name any solution. All of them are using so extensively because of AI ML algorithms to make this basically more predictive. Even go back to traditional IPS system, right? It was purely working on anomaly detection, right? What is normal, what is not normal. That's where we create a baseline, and we put a IPS device in learning mode, so that any deviation, right, which is not normal, can be there is an alert going back to the IPS console saying that this looks to be something suspicious, so that you go back and analyze. So the point today is all the solutions are helping your SOC analysts so that they can stay, because it's others next to impossible, because they have so much of there's a word called log fatigue. There's so much of logs out there, so much of data out there, right? It's next to impossible that a SOC analyst, you are asking him to find a needle from a haystack. So these correlation engines use so much of AI ML algorithms model out there, and of course they also a lot of data is fed into the systems, what we call threat intel feeds, which is also coming from outside. They themselves are using a lot of AI ML, and they're trying to make basically trying to give the relevant data to the organization, and then the organization also adds context to it. I think the biggest challenge today is about context setting. Like if you have the right context, so what is really risky is all about the context. So the point is, data science, AI, ML is extensively used today. It's no doubt that it's helping many organizations to counter these frauds, counter these breaches, and it helps to identify frauds, what we call preemptive or what we call typical proactive monitoring rather than reactive monitoring. It's not post breach. So how can I, in fact, reduce the dwell time? So dwell time is again very standard term in cyber security. Can my systems help me to detect this breach at a much early stage, not post breach, right? So that I can alert the right teams, so that to reduce or to contain the damage, to reduce the. So I think the whole every enterprise is seeing how they can reduce this dwell time and how they can detect these breaches at a much early stage, so that they can respond to these breaches. So definitely in cyber security, cyber breaches, so a lot of AI ML is helping to detect these frauds at a much early stage. So sorry, Mitesh, to hijack your session, but yeah, please go ahead.
No, I'm almost done with my slides. But what you said is absolutely correct. Uh, Given cybersecurity or given an audit framework, or given fraud or log management, or even predictive maintenance, these logs are also I mean, there's a log fatigue also happening in manufacturing. That is another domain which is like uh, creating a lot of data using IoT. You must have heard about IoT, which is Internet of Things. There is a lot of logs which are generated, and put putting that data to value is a major challenge which a lot of organizations are facing. And that's where as I said, the skill set, India is by far doing well in terms of skill set, but it needs to the demand is very high for AI and ML skill set. So yeah,
Absolutely,
absolutely.
I completely agree with you, Mitesh. In fact, no doubt. But I also see in a lot of these new generation cybersecurity courses. In fact, they add Python because they start with Python, learning Python, language like learning R. So I know, I agree. In fact, and I think you touched a very important point about IoT. I completely agree. In fact, with probably 5G, I'm sure very soon. So after that, lot of sensors, lot of data. In fact, I think connected cars, including your refrigerator, washing machine, all of them are going to throw so much of data out there. I think all the sensors carry so much of data, and they throw data, but this data has to go somewhere. I think we're already talking about edge security, edge computing, right? Where a lot of companies have already started investing, or I normally keep track of, like example, Akamai and all, right? The CDN providers, right? They already have so much of pops out there. So all of them are really going to in fact use the solutions. IoT is going to be the next big thing. And again, as a cybersecurity professional practitioners, there's a lot of things to be done out there, because the next breaches are going to be through those IoT sensors, and of course compromising those sensors. Or there are already a lot of breaches on the IC systems, industrial control systems, connected systems. So while we keep talking about a lot of security, cyber security on those systems are also so critical, what we call the national critical infrastructure, right? Which needs. So yes, absolutely. So data science, AI, ML, what have we spoken? Absolutely, that's the heart. And I think you touched upon manufacturing. No doubt, today every enterprise has a RPA journey, robotic process automation, and definitely data, and how to use this data, and data science and analytics and whatnot. Absolutely great. So Mitesh, I think you definitely, maybe you can just add few more, and then we can move to questions, and along with Q&A, we can also you can still add as it goes. Maybe if you have any more slides, you can just continue maybe 5 10 minutes, and then we can move to Q&A.
Sure. So I just want to touch upon to continue what you were saying, this is one of the slide which I skipped because we went to use cases. So, the horizons of AI. So, being a data science professional, I mean, this is irrespective of risk analytics. It can be into any domains, and within risk analytics, it applies much more. You can see that a lot of risk analytics work that we do right now, especially from an Indian industry point of view, which is between Horizon 1 and Horizon 2. We do a lot of RPA, we do a lot of machine learning, we do a lot of descriptive analytics, visualization. But we are yet to move into deep learning areas. We are yet to move into intelligent advisor, quantum computing. Blockchain is something which will take time to come. It's globally also taking some time. But assisted intelligence is what we do right now. Augmented intelligence is where we have to reach at the high level of augmented intelligence, where machine learning can augment the human decision. So a lot of sentiment analysis is, so different industries are at different level but from a risk analytics point of view, at an overall level, we are yet to pass these horizons. Just to touch upon this, and from a foundational capability point of view, this is where AI horizon for risk analytics a path should be. Um, and last but not the least, I wanted to talk about the tools and technologies which you may already be hearing about there in the industry. But from a visualization point of view, Tableau, Power BI, and Click are the top tools which the analytics industry is using, and also in risk analytics. Power BI is the tool for the future for visualization. Programming languages, Python, again, is the most popular data science language, but also SQL for data management is very important to learn. So even anybody from a cyber background, or who wants to start their journey in data science for doing risk assessment, I would definitely advise them to start with Tableau, Power BI, and Python from a tool point of view. These are some of the advanced data science tools like Alteryx, NIME, and RapidMiner, which are used for workflow-driven tools, GUI-based tools, which are licensed tools, which are also very widely used in the industry. So this is just the last slide, and I will rest my presentation with this and open for questions.
Great. So Mitesh, absolutely, you can. Means I don't know if you're looking at the attendee list or not. Means there are 370 people still live, so that it still shows that this is one of the best sessions we had in the past, and no doubt it's a very interesting topic, and there's a lot of interest on this domain. I'm sure that's the reason why we have so much of active participation. And now let's move to questions, maybe, or maybe anything else you want to add. Of course, we have time, and maybe Swapna, you want to add something? Maybe what the whole discussion, if you want to add something, or we can. I can see there are more than 30 questions in the Q&A window. I know we will not address all of them, but still we can take few of them, which are most of the questions may be repeated also. Swapna, if you just add, meanwhile, let me look at the Q&A and let me do some data science here, and I'll read out questions for you, for both of you, and you can take them.
Yeah, Satish, I can also see there are around 42 questions
Yes.
on the window. So maybe we can start answering, wherever.
No, absolutely. No, you are the SMEs, both of you. So I'll just read out questions for you. I'm just seeing where to start, because.
Satish, let me pick and choose.
Absolutely. Oh, great. That's great. That will be good, Mitesh. Please.
So one of the questions which Joseph has asked is, how do you express explainability in unsupervised and reinforcement learning options? Now, this is one of the topic which actually I wanted to cover here, but I have removed the slides at the last. So explainability, what Joseph is asking is, all these models that are there, right? There is a lot of black box behind that, and in fact, assurance of this models itself is a big challenge which industry is facing right now. And there are a lot of explainable AI frameworks which are coming out with this, and there are a lot of explainable AI frameworks which are available, and globally in fact, in Europe and US, there are a lot of laws which are regulating algorithms. The GDPR is there. All the regulations are there, which are regulating the bias and the transparency of the algorithms. And that's where explainability comes in. And we can address it definitely. There are frameworks which are available, but it's evolving. And in India, especially, it's at a very nascent stage. And yes, it's one of the major problems. So I think it's again the same question which one of the other participant asked is what is the risk involved in using ML? Is the same thing. The explainable AI is the answer. If you can do some research on explainable AI online, you'd find some good research papers on risk involved using machine learning. And there is a lot of algorithm assurance services which are being developed and which are the way forward. And that's one of the key modern risk. I would say it's one of the evolving risk, which is machine learning risk or model risk or AI risk, algorithmic risk. And this is a mitigation of those kind of risks. The frameworks are available. Swapna, do you want to pick up one question?
Swapna, you're on mute. Mitesh, you can continue.
Yeah, I think, I have unmuted myself. I'll just go back to the first question, which was sent by Pratyush. How does the analytics help in non-technical control testing or sampling? So basically, Pratyush, to answer your question, whenever we discuss risk analytics, it's more about risk data analytics, right? But the data has to be either it has to be in structured or unstructured format to kind of perform any kind of risk analytics there. So when you're saying about non-technical control testing, I hope you're referring to the SOPs and all. If there is a change in the SOP or there is a change in the SLA, just to clarify, just to answer your question, there are a lot of tools and technology which are evolving for analyzing the unstructured data, and it differs from case to case basis. For certain non-technical control, you can still go ahead with the testing and sampling, but there are certain things which will be like manually captured in some manual files and all that, wherein you will not be able to do this particular piece. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, good, Swapna. Maybe you can move to the next question.
Right. Let me take one of the question. The question is, what is the best way an audit or an infosec professional can gain skills around machine learning and data science, and what courses can be taken up? So right now, the courses which are there, which are available, are industry agnostic. So they are not audit analytics specific courses or cyber analytics specific courses. They are industry agnostic, and that's where you can uh, basically gain some skills on machine learning and data science, and then probably spend some time in your area and connect it to your area. A lot of courses are available. I mean, Andrew Ng is one of the very great Coursera courses which are there, and best knowledge can he provide on machine learning and data science. So there is another question for auditor. Do we need to learn machine learning or analytics and Python? So I think as an auditor, this is something that can be a good add-on to your profile, or this can be a good add-on to your skill set. But having said that, again, the audit. So you are an expert in audit domain, and if you gain this piece of knowledge, you can probably manage teams which can help you do audit using analytics. So there's definitely value in this, and probably you can also think from future point of view where you will probably move totally into analytics domain slowly. So uh, it depends on your interest. So probably you should give it a try. But in your current job function, it will help you a lot if you even get an understanding of basic analytics or how to perform basic analytics.
I think there is one more question which is about about the process analytics versus the IT analytics. It says that this seems to be relevant to financial audits. What about general audits? So are you referring to the general IT audits? See, whenever we talk about risk analytics, it could be related to a process or it could be related to a technology, right? So if when it comes to general IT audit, I remember a particular case study wherein the client has reached out to us saying that the client doesn't have any visibility on the changes which is happening at the system, and either it could be a kind of emergency change or it could be a kind of a general change. So instead, in order to identify where that exact risk arises, so we have done that entire analysis of the change management cycle, wherein we can say how many number of releases have done, who have actually released it, if there is a concentration of the releases particular with a particular user. So all this kind of I'll say maybe it is not again a predictive analytics, but yes, all this kind of detective analysis can be done on the IT control perspective also, if you have a change log available with you, right? So just to answer your question here, yes, whenever the risk analytics is concerned, it can be to a financial audit also, and it can be leveraged for IT audits as well. Mitesh, you want to go next?
Yeah. I'm just looking at a lot of questions are around safety of machine learning, and that's the right concern. So what is the way to find the root cause of the expiry? So this is, I think this is specific to the use case that I talked about. So there is this technique called decision tree. It's a machine learning technique which is very easy to understand and very explainable, but it's not very robust technique, but it can give you an insight into the root cause of the expiry. So on specific use cases, there were a lot of root cause to the expiry which were organization specific. So but it can be anything ranging from yeah, depending on the supply chain processes which are being defined for that organization. So in use case 2, how was fraud factored in? What part that intentional action play in risk analytics? So in use case 2, as I said, it was a preventive control as from a process point of view. It was a process control, and it was not uh, intended from a fraud point of view. So it's basically the preventive analytics use case that I'm talking about. So Swapna, a lot of question around modeling. Should I take some?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what kind of data went into the model, what size, and how were this parameter decided? So the parameters that were decided was again discussed with the SME, the data scientist, and the chief risk, chief audit, the third line of defense, organization third line of defense, and other teams. So this parameter decisions are taken into that, and this data, as I said, SAP systems, there were other portal systems where the data was being tracked, and some of the qualitative data that can be in form of a survey or that can be in form of a document, which were then converted into the quantitative data for model consumption. Size, I mean, this data sizes for ranges in GBs, 100 GBs to 200 GBs probably, I think. But these days we have technologies over cloud where size is not a constraint at all. So you can always up your infra to manage the size. Does predictive analytics fall under machine learning or it comes under AI? Again, a jargon related question. So predictive analytics is something that we use to predict. So in fact, AI comes and machine learning is one of the approaches to AI. So AI is the broader area, and machine learning is the sub area of AI, and predictive analytics is again sub area of machine learning, right? So predictive analytics is a form of analytics, is not a technique. So that's where this jargon, there's a lot of jargon clarity which is required. I think you should whoever needs to get this clarity, you should read up on AI versus ML versus deep learning versus data science over the on internet, and you can get a good understanding of about this. Swapna, there is one question. I think in your experience, where do you see most organization on the maturity scale? Do you want to take that up?
Uh, Yeah, Mitesh. I think this is again, as I said, matlab in our experience, I'd say we have seen that the more big is the company size, they are capable of processing more amount of data. They are kind of with a stable ERP and all, and they are more towards implementing this particular piece. Wherein I have seen some organization who are of small size. Normally, they are at a very basic level of analytics wherein they are doing some kind of automated MIS reporting. So again, this is a question wherein I think it depends from company to company, where the analytics inclination is there. They are more prone to, kind of at a mature stage, and wherein there are certain companies that are still at a very basic stage. But I think most of the companies are in level 2 or level 3 at this point of time. Considering my experience, maybe that opinion will differ from person to person, but I'll see them at analytics maturity level in between 2 and 3, because data science is again a kind of emerging technology which is still to occupy the market.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I have seen one more question here saying that can you please share what tools and technologies are you referring to when you speak about vendor risk, web scraping ones? Okay, so basically there is no, there has been customized tool to assess the vendor risk management. But again, when I was talking about the web scraping ones, these are basically some of the packages which are available in Python and all, wherein you have to code certain the kind of text. It's a kind of text analytics platform wherein you have to just type the name of the EA, and you have to write certain codes to kind of get some details from the web about the vendor. There is one more question. To be specific, I'd like to understand on what models you have used and what would you recommend for someone when the sample data is very less, under 100 items. I think this is like when I'm talking about risk analytics, I'm talking about 100% population. I'm not very sure when the question says sample data is very less, under 100 items. So when you normally implement risk analytics, we cover the 100% population, whether it's 1,000 or whether it's a lakh, it doesn't matter. But again, if it's a kind of small size firm, maybe the relevance of applying risk analytics will not be very much there.
Okay. There's a question around ROI on risk analytics. So, how do you estimate the ROI? But as an actual return on investment, not in an avoidance of loss. So, now, if we are not looking at as an avoidance of a loss, I think there are a lot of other advantages to having your risk control framework very strong from an analytics point of view, from a governance point of view, because uh, this helps a lot of other soft advantages like uh, trust within the organization, ethical advantages. There are a lot of advantages around process improvements and turnaround times, and times to manage risk are reduced. There's a lot of confidence that come into the system. External customer confidence can be there, which helps you towards the business. But I would say again, not as an avoidance of a loss, is again, I think we should consider that. I'm being biased as a risk analytics professional, but risk analytics avoid you to help you do some time and cost savings, and that's where as well as reputation savings. So this is how we can estimate ROI on it, and this is how we do it. In fact, with some of our clients, they give us our ROI targets in terms of this should be the savings or time savings or something like that. Those kind of metrics are always there while measuring the success of the risk analytics exercise. I Satish,
No,
do we
perfect, perfect. No,
I think, Satish, before we close, I just saw one question which is very interesting. Can we assume COVID-19 is due to failure of risk analytics in medical science? This, I think, we can pretty much relate to the current scenario. I think when I started this entire meeting, I said that, I think most of the risks are hidden. No? I think this is a perfect example of that. I don't want to say it's a failure of risk analytics in medical science, but I think if you see the other part of it, the government has taken enough risk mitigation plans to kind of avoid the pandemic. So yeah, it's like I just relate to the current scenario. So I just thought of taking this question. Sorry. Go ahead, Satish.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no, perfect, fine. So nothing. I think we have covered most of the questions. Great. In fact, Mitesh and Swapna, in fact, nothing. I think it's time to close, and we are absolutely on time. If there is any more, see, normally, or if anyone would like to ask anything on this, I know we have Q&A window still open. I'm just looking at the chat window because there's a lot of active chat also keeps happening. I know it's very difficult to keep a track of the chat window, but yeah. So a lot of questions around CPs. I'm sure most of you know, while registration, you would have given your ISACA ID, and the CPs will be posted directly into your My ISACA account. You can go and find out. It will be as unapplied CP hours, and there will be a feedback form coming to you along with the recording link to your email. Please provide feedback. That will also help us to, in fact, improve, and any other suggestions are most welcome. So I think with that, it's time to close. Maybe a quick, I'll just do there's nothing much. I think I'm just looking at what else. It's great. I think, so Swapna and Mitesh, you can see, I think in the participant rate, 315 people still live waiting for for us to still hear. I think that itself is a great, so once again, I should say thank you, Swapna. A big thank you from ISACA Bangalore chapter executive members. So on behalf of all of them, I thank Swapna and Mitesh for taking out time. In fact, it's a very interesting topic, and you can see the amount of active participation. So we definitely would love to have you again, and we'll happy to host you maybe with a little more detailed workshop or something. But yeah, these are our standard 2-hour CP sessions. I know whatever best can be done in this 2-hour CP session. I'm sure you both have really done a great, means a great value has been given to the members. So with that, I would like to, in any closing comments, Swapna and Mitesh, you want to anything?
I think I just wanted to thank Satish and to all the active participants. Even after Saturday and all, you guys are still charged up to learn new things. So I think it gives us a lot of pressure that we should be upscaling ourselves to get into the relevant topics for you going forward. So thank you so much for organizing this. Anything from you, Mitesh?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing is that data is the new oil. So everybody have to get in touch with the data in their professional roles sooner or later. So that's the closing statement from my end.
Great, nice statement. Data is the new oil. Is of course we talking same thing. How to protect data? Absolutely, you made it right. How to use data? Yes, of course. That's great, Mitesh. So on that note, I think we have come to the end of this session. So thank you very much. And anyway, I just do a quick nothing. So again, once again, I'm just sharing the screen. So I told you we are starting our CISA, CISM, CRISC, CGIT classes from next week onwards. So I think members, please encourage your friends, colleagues who are interested to take up the certifications. And of course, our CP journeys will continue, and we'll come back again with one more interesting topic with the great speakers like what we listened today. With that, once again, thank you, Swapna, and thank you, Mitesh, for taking out time. And with that, thank you all. In fact, all without active participation, these sessions are not so meaningful. And we are very happy that with the COVID situation, we are still able to provide value back to the members who are joining and keen to learn, as Swapna said rightly, right? Upskilling and upgrading is absolutely essential in these current times. And it's a really good time to upskill, learn, and revise and Great. So with that, thank you all for active participation, and we'll get a feedback link in the email, and please help us with the feedback, and the recording also will be posted in the YouTube channel of Isaga Bangalore. I'm sure all of you are keeping track of that channel, and there's so many videos out there. So with that, all great. Thank you once again, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you, Swapna, and thank you, Mitesh, once again.
Thanks, Satish.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Good night.